I'm 87 years old. If you're in your 60s, 70s, or already retired, this might be worth listening to. And I've spent the last 20 years watching people step into retirement thinking they're going to be fine. Some of them are, a lot of them aren't. And it's not because they didn't have enough money. It's because they walked into retirement still paying for a life they don't live anymore. I had a friend, good man, ran a small distribution business here in Chicago. Sold it, had decent money put away. He told me, "Rich, I'm set, I'll be all right." And for a while he was. But he kept the same house, same expenses, same habits, never really stopped to ask what actually made sense anymore. And a few years in, he wasn't as comfortable as he thought he'd be. That's the part nobody talks about. Retirement doesn't fall apart all at once. It drifts. And it took me a long time to understand why, until I started paying closer attention to how people were actually living. I spent most of my life running a logistics business here in Chicago. Nothing fancy. Trucks, warehouses, contracts, long days, a lot of moving parts. I did all right. Sold it in my early 60s. Figured I had things pretty well lined up. And for the most part, I did. But I'll be honest with you. I made the same mistake I watched other people make later on. I kept paying for things that made sense when I was working, but didn't make much sense anymore once life slowed down. Didn't question it, just kept going. And over the years, I started noticing something. Friends of mine, smart people, hard-working, stepping into retirement with decent money and still feeling tight. Not broke, just not comfortable. And that got my attention. One of the first things I started noticing was the house. Not just any house. The one people had been living in for 30, 40 years. I had a neighbor, Tom. Good man. Retired from a manufacturing job out in Cicero. Raised 3 kids in that place. By the time he hit his late 70s, it was just him and his wife in a 4-bedroom house. And the truth is, they stopped using most of it. Didn't go upstairs anymore. Knees weren't what they used to be. 1 bedroom, kitchen, living room, that was their whole world. But every winter, he was still heating the entire house. Still fixing things that broke in rooms nobody walked into. One year, the furnace went out. Cost him just under $9,000. I remember that because he kept shaking his head when he told me. Said, all that money just to keep empty space warm. And that's when it really clicked for me. You're not living in the house anymore. You're maintaining it. Then there's the kids. And this one, people don't like hearing. Now, don't get me wrong. I help mine too. That's what you do. But I've seen a pattern. A man retires, finally has some time, some savings, and then every few years there's another situation. Car trouble, credit cards, some idea that didn't work out, and he steps in again. I knew a guy, Martin, worked construction his whole life, tough as they come, retired with enough, not rich, but solid. But his son kept getting into trouble, and Martin kept fixing it. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, sometimes more. I remember one time he told me he had to delay fixing his own roof because he just sent his son another check. That stayed with me because now he's patching problems in his own house to cover mistakes in someone else's life. And I'll say this as plainly as I can. If you're still financially carrying your adult children, you're not helping them. You're just making sure they never have to stand on their own. Now, not everyone gets this wrong. I met a man a few years back sitting outside a diner, middle of the morning, no rush, just having his coffee. We got to talking. He told me, I've got about $230,000 saved, bringing in around $5,000 a month between Social Security and a small pension. Said his rent was about $1,200. Groceries and bills, maybe another $1,000 or so. He leaned back, looked around, and said, I don't need much anymore. I just like knowing I'm not worried when I go to sleep. No stress, no second guessing every bill. That's a different kind of wealth. He wasn't rich, but he was free. Now, the reason people like him stay comfortable is because they pay attention to the small things most people ignore. Then there are the small payments, the ones nobody pays attention to. I sat down with a friend one afternoon. We went through his bank statements line by line. $58 a month for something he didn't remember signing up for. $110 for an insurance policy he didn't understand anymore. Another $40 here, $70 there. By the time we added it up, he was spending over $3,000 a year on things he barely used. And the worst part, none of it felt like a problem to him because it was all small. That's how it gets you. Money doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks. And most people don't notice until they start feeling tight every single month and can't explain why. This one's quieter, but it traps a lot of people, holding on to a lifestyle that doesn't fit anymore. I knew a man who kept a second car years after he retired. Didn't need it, barely drove it. Sometimes it just sat there for weeks. Battery died twice one winter, but he kept paying insurance, maintenance, registration, all of it. Why? Just in case. But really, it was harder for him to let it go than to keep paying for it. And that's the part people don't say out loud. Some people would rather keep paying for a life they used to have than adjust to the one they're actually living. On the other hand, I remember talking to a man who went the opposite direction, sold the bigger house, got rid of a lot of stuff, moved into a smaller place closer to town. He told me, first week felt strange, too quiet, too simple. Then he laughed, said, now I wake up, make my coffee, and there's nothing waiting to break, nothing waiting to cost me money. No yard, no extra rooms, no constant maintenance. I sleep better now, he said. Haven't slept this well in years. That's not about money. That's about weight coming off your shoulders. And this is usually where people get themselves into trouble. I can afford it. I've heard that my whole life. And sometimes it's true. at least for a while. I had a friend, did well for himself, good investments, solid retirement. Every time something came up, that's what he'd say: I can afford it. New car, upgrades, little things that didn't seem like a big deal. But over time, those decisions stacked up. More monthly cost, less flexibility. I saw him one day sitting at his kitchen table, just looking at his bills, quiet, not panicking, but not comfortable either. And that's the danger. If you keep saying, I can afford it, one day you'll realize you built a life that's expensive to maintain and hard to step away from. And this is what it all comes down to. At this stage of life, money isn't just money anymore. It's time, it's ease, it's how your days actually feel. I've watched people spend years paying for things that didn't add anything to their life anymore, and then wonder why retirement feels tight. Those two things are connected. Every dollar you keep putting into something unnecessary, that's something you're taking away from your own peace. And at 80, 85, 90, peace matters more than anything you can buy. So when you really look at it, this isn't about cutting everything out of your life. It's about being honest about what still makes sense and what doesn't anymore. I've sat at kitchen tables with men who did everything right, worked hard, saved money, planned ahead, and still they felt tight every month. Not because they didn't have enough, but because they were still paying for a version of life they had already outgrown. And the thing is, it doesn't show up all at once. It shows up in small ways. You hesitate before turning the heat up. You think twice before going out to eat. You start checking your bank account more often than you used to. That's not the kind of retirement most people picture. At this age, you're not just spending money anymore. You're shaping how your days feel. I've seen people with plenty still carry that quiet pressure. And I've seen others with less wake up, make their coffee, and just sit there in peace. No rush, no noise, no wait. That's what they really come down to. Not more money, less weight. Because in the end, the goal isn't to hold on to everything you built. It's to finally feel like you can put it down. If something in this made sense to you, take a look at your own situation tonight and see what you might still be holding on to that you don't really need anymore. And if you found this helpful, you can always come back. I'll have more to share. So when you really look at it, this isn't about cutting everything out of your life. It's about being honest about what still makes sense and what doesn't anymore. I've sat at kitchen tables with men who did everything right, worked hard, saved money, planned ahead, and still they felt tight every month. Not because they didn't have enough, but because they were still paying for a version of life they had already outgrown. And the thing is, it doesn't show up all at once. It shows up in small ways. You hesitate before turning the heat up. You think twice before going out to eat. You start checking your bank account more often than you used to. That's not the kind of retirement most people picture. At this age, you're not just spending money anymore. You're shaping how your days feel. I've seen people with plenty still carry that quiet pressure, and I've seen others with less wake up, make their coffee, and just sit there in peace. No rush, no noise, no weight. That's what this really comes down to. Not more money, less weight. Because in the end, the goal isn't to hold on to everything you've built. It's to finally feel like you can put it down. If something in this made sense to you, take a look at your own situation tonight and see what you might still be holding on to that you don't really need anymore. And if you found this helpful, you can always come back. I'll have more to share.